Hello students, we will start today with Mendel's laws. It is also called as laws of inheritance. Laws of inheritance. Or it is also called as Mendel's laws of inheritance. Or Mendel's laws of inheritance. So, Mendel has proposed three important laws to explain his experiments. Already we learned that Mendel's experiments are published with a name Experiments with Plant Hybridization. That about that book, the term we have heard. Now we will see about the laws given by Mendel. So, Mendel proposed three important laws to explain his experiments. To explain his experiments. Now, what is the experiment done by Mendel on the pea plant? First one, we will see about experiment. In a single term, we call this experiment as artificial hybridization. In other terms, we can also call this one as artificial pollination or cross pollination. Name is artificial hybridization or artificial pollination or cross pollination. Cross pollination. So these are the three terms that are applied for Mendel's experiment. Now we will see what Mendel has done in this artificial hybridization. Main important term in this artificial hybridization is about emasculation term and also bagging term. What are those emasculation and bagging terms? First point, Mendel removed anthers of flowers. Anthers of flowers. Now, removing of these anthers is called, the process is called as emasculation. If a bit has come, what is meant by emasculation? Or if a bit has come, if anthers are removed, or a bit has come, if the androecium of the plant is removed, or if the bit has come like in an unisexual plant, if the male sex organs are removed in case of pea plant experiments done by the Mendel, then also answer will be emasculation only. Now, in the second step, the emasculated flowers stigma is covered by a polythene bag. Now, covering the stigma of the emasculated flower with a polythene bag, that covering is called as bagging. Now, what is use of bagging? Bagging will remove, or bagging will prevent the contamination of the stigma by the same type of pollen or any another undesired pollen. So, what is meant by bagging and what is its use? Bagging means covering of the emasculated flowers stigma with a polythene bag or any some other bag. Now, use of bagging is preventing stigma from contamination. Contamination doesn't mean like removing the dirt and all that. Contamination here, in the sense, according to the experiment done by Mendel, it means that preventing the falling or the fertilization with undesired pollen. Either it can be of the same flower or any another flower which is not having the desired characters in it. Now, in the third step, Mendel sprinkled the desired pollen grain to obtain the desired offspring, which has the required characteristic feature because of the selected pollen grain. Okay, this is the experiment done by Mendel. Now, let's also see why Mendel has selected only the pea plant. Because the first point will be the lifespan of a pollen grain, our lifespan of a pea plant is very less. Means within a week it will give completely the seeds. Lifespan of a pea plant is only 3 to 4 weeks. Means within that time period it has to grow, the seed has to germinate, it has to grow into adult plant, and it will give the seeds also. Second thing, pea plant produced 14 different or contrasting characters. The third thing, pea plant gave a large or huge seeds or offsprings. Okay, see, offsprings means when the seeds are germinated, then we will get this one. Here we can say pea plant gave a large or huge number of seeds. Huge number of seeds. This is one of the important feature why Mendel has selected the pea plants. Another one, seeds did not show dormancy. What do you mean by this? Dormancy means any type of seed during its germination, it should get germinated in the favorable and unfavorable conditions. Such type of nature is they are they are not exhibiting the dormancy. See, some seeds, when the conditions are not favorable, they will not germinate. But pea plant is able to tolerate even unfavorable conditions, and it is when we provide the required nutrients and little bit of moisture, it is showing the germination. Means it is overcoming the type of unfavorable conditions very quickly and easily. Another important one, pea plant showed both self and cross pollinations. This is also one of the best adaptation that is exhibited by the pea plants. See, now we will start with the Mendel's laws. What are the three laws? The first one is law of dominance. Second one is law of segregation. Third one is law of independent assortment. So we will start with Mendel's first law, that is law of dominance. So first one, law of dominance. First of all, we will try to understand meaning of a law of dominance. Here, when a homozygous pure plants which are exhibiting dominant character are crossed with homozygous recessive plants which are exhibiting pure recessive character are crossed, then in the first generation we get only the dominating character expressing plantlets only. We are not getting the recessive one. That one is taken with the character height of the pea plant. Okay, so now first of all we'll see the just easy sentences to explain the law of dominance. Then we will go what are the some other type of sentence framings that are included in different books. But sometimes in genetics we have to learn the sentences as it is given in the textbooks. This is because most of the time when questions are being asked in genetics, the sentences are not being changed. So let's learn in that critical sentence framing sometimes, and also we will get meaning from that sentence. So first one, easy one, we write here. When a homozygous pure plants of dominant genotypes are crossed with are crossed with homozygous pure plants with recessive genotypes, the obtained offsprings in first generation are exhibiting only the dominant character, but the genotype is heterozygous. But the genotype is of heterozygous. By this sentence, we can get complete meaning of law of dominance. Here, homozygous pure plants, we know the alleles should be of same type. Dominant genotypes I have written. So, if you take the character height, then dominant alleles will be like this. And another crossed with homozygous pure plants. Again, here also homozygous means the alleles should be of same type, but recessive gene types. Since we have taken here capital alphabet to represent the dominancy, we are taking the small letter alphabet to represent the genotype, recessive genotypes. The obtained offsprings in the first generation, in the sense F1 generation, F means filial, exhibiting the dominant character, but the genotypes are of heterozygous, in the sense the alleles are of not same type. The genotype of the offspring will be like this. We will see another definition of law of dominance. Law of dominance. Another definition of this: in a cross between two pure plants, that are different for any pair of contrasting characters, and the character appeared in first generation is always dominant. This is another definition. Now, already explained what is meant by this. So we'll take an example here, that is monohybrid cross. So monohybrid cross is considered as an example for law of dominance. If we take two plants, so we are considering those two plants which we are taking for our example explanation as parent 1, which is having homozygous dominant alleles, which is crossed with homozygous recessive alleles. But suppose think that this is one pea plant that is having its genotypes like this. This is another pea plant which is second pea plant mentioned, which is having purely homozygous recessive alleles. If it is crossed, we know that plant always produces the gametes. Either it can be an pollen grain or an egg. Okay. So supposing that it is producing, the alleles are getting, only one allele will be getting into one gamete. Means if this plant is giving out pollen grains, then if this is the pollen grain, only one allele will enter into that pollen grain. So that we are telling that gamete is a haploid. For supposing that these two are male gametes, which are of haploid in condition, and inside the male gamete, the chromosomes are having dominant allele only one. And suppose think that this plant is producing the eggs. We know eggs are nothing but the gametes. Sperms are also, or pollen grains are also nothing but the gametes. So now if this is the gamete, gametes are always haploid in condition. Think that these are the female gametes. These are having the alleles only of one type, that is of recessive. But suppose think. Now this is the condition. Now these gametes are considered as parental gametes. Parental gametes. Now, when a cross is happened between these two types of gametes, or the gametes produced by these two plants, then what are the consequences or what are the results in F1 generation? We have written as parental gametes like this. Gametes as cross with these two gametes which I have written just before here. Now, the next generation is fertilization between these two. That is considered as F1 generation. Here, F1 means first filial. First filial. So F means filial. Filial. Now we are crossing. Just before drawing the Punnett square, I will just draw the other mode of crossing method, which all students, most of the students already who have read this chapter and who are thorough in this monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. Just I will draw another method just before drawing the Punnett square. We are getting heterozygous form of offspring. Now there is a possibility of crossing between this gamete and this one. Again, we are getting the heterozygous form of offspring. This one with this two recessive one. Again, we are getting heterozygous genotype offspring. Here also we are getting the same parental gametes when they are represented in the Punnett square. How it will be? Let's take the dominant one, which we are considering as pollen grain, and the recessive one, which we are considering as the gametes or the egg cells. We are getting the offspring. So these which are present in the boxes, all these are considered as the offspring. Now, phenotype of F1 generation. F1 generation is all are tall. Here we are not getting. Now, what is the ratio of phenotype? Phenotypic ratio. Ratio. When we are representing the ratio, we have to write like dominant is to recessive. Here, the phenotypic character under dominance about whatever the example that we have taken is tall. So tall is to the recessive one is short or dwarf. Here answer is all are tall in this F1 generation. So it will be 4 is to dwarf is 0. So the ratio in the F1 generation of phenotype F1 generation is 4 is to 1, 4 is to 0. Now, coming about genotypic ratio. Genotypes in F1 generation. If you write like this, all are of heterozygous. Now, if you write the ratio of genotypes of F1. If you write like this, we have to represent like, are there capital T, F1 generation unit. Is to, because in the parents we have taken as homozygous. Are there any homozygous we have to represent? Is to, are there any heterozygous we have to represent? Is to, are there any recessive or form of alleles? Homozygous or heterozygous. This is representing dominance, heterozygous, and the recessive one homozygous. Here, offspring did not give out. So it will be 0 is to all are heterozygous. So 4 is to no homozygous recessive. Again 0. So the genotypic ratio of F1 generation in the F1 generation is 0 is to 4 is to 0. Coming to the phenotypic ratio of F1 generation, it is 4 is to 0. Now, let's cross the F1 generation with F1 generation offsprings only. That is called as self-cross between or among the F1 generations, so that we will get the F2 generation. Here we are not crossing the F1 generation with that of the parents. That is another type of cross are there. That is test cross, back cross, reciprocal cross. That we will discuss later. But in this monohybrid cross, if we cross one heterozygous, we have seen one example. Homozygous cross with homozygous. Now let's see another example of heterozygous crossing with heterozygous under monohybrid. And we will see the F2 generation. What will be the result? After F1 generation, comma, self-cross between or among F1 offsprings. So we got here all F1 generation as heterozygous. So let's cross this type of for F1 generation offspring with that of F1 generation offspring. Now this again will get, let's get the gametes. Think that this is a male gamete which is having capital T, another male gamete which is having small t, means recessive allele. Here also the gametes with dominant allele, gamete with recessive allele. So these type of gametes are called as F1 generation gametes. Now, directly I'm going for Punnett square of this. Think that these are the male pollen, both these are the female pollen. Let's write a Punnett square. Now, these two are crossed, and here we have got in one of the offspring with homozygous alleles, another offspring heterozygous with heterozygous allele, another offspring with heterozygous allele, another offspring with homozygous recessive alleles. Now let's write the phenotypes. Phenotypes, this is called as F2 generation. F2 generation. The phenotypes of F2 are 1. Pure tall. We should not write like this. Are 3 are tall. 3 are tall, and 1 is dwarf. 1 is dwarf. Now if you write phenotypic ratio, we have to write like how many are tall, how many are dwarf. If you write like this, tall are 3 is to dwarf is 1. So the ratio is 3 is to 1. Coming to the genotypes. Genotypes we have to represent like how many are homozygous, how many are heterozygous. If you write like this, homozygous are 2. What are those? Capital T, and small t. This one. How many are heterozygous? Again is 2. What are those? Capital T, small t, small t. If you write the ratio, like, I don't have place here. Okay. Under genotypic ratio, let's write like homozygous dominant is to heterozygous is to homozygous recessive. We can write here dominant, heterozygous, dominant. We already know that in heterozygous, mostly the dominant one is only getting expressed. But there are some exceptions also, called as incomplete dominance. That we'll see later. How many are homozygous dominant alleles? 1 is to how many are heterozygous? 1 and 2. 2 is to how many are homozygous recessive? Again 1. So the answer is 1 is to 2 is to 1 genotype in case of F2 generation. Now, here we can take another example. This example is regarding the height character of the pea plant. You can also take one more example that I have seen in some of the competitive examination books for NEET. Likewise, curling hair is dominant over silky hair. It means that the alleles that are responsible for the curling hair are dominant over the alleles that are responsible for the silky hair or soft hair. That example also we will take as one of the best examples for our discussion. Next, I am going for that example and I am arranging this. Example 2. Curling hair is dominant over silky hair or soft hair. This is another best example. Now, Law of dominance is very much significant in the nature for most of the organisms, and it is considered as true type of phenotypic and genotypic expression given by many types of plants and animals. Still, there are some exceptions, like some of the alleles during their expression in the phenotypes, they are not showing complete dominance. They are mixing and giving out the intermediate or third type of phenotypic character. Such type of expression is called as incomplete dominance, that is given by dominant alleles. So, law of dominance is significant and true, but still there are some exceptions. There are some exceptions called as incomplete dominance exhibited by dominant alleles due to mix up with recessive alleles or genes. So that is called as incomplete dominance. Here we have some examples. So examples of incomplete dominance. Here we forgot one more example, that is, due to this incomplete exhibition or phenotypic character by the dominant alleles, law of dominance is considered as not universally applicable. You'll write that. So, this law is not universally applicable. And best examples are, in case of 4 o'clock plant, which is also called as Mirabilis jalapa, and another type of plant is there, that is Antirrhinum, which is also called as snapdragon. This is given in your NCERT book also, which is also called as dog flower. In these both types of plants, red color is dominant, white color is recessive. White flowers are recessive, but they showed the third intermediate color, that is called as pink color, in the F1 generation. This we will discuss in the next video. Okay. So this is about the incomplete dominance and its phenotypic expression by some of the exceptions. We can also take some other example like eggplant. For suppose violet color brinjal we know, green color brinjal we know. We also see in the market third variety of brinjals in which there are stripes like violet color stripes and green color stripes on the brinjal outermost coat. That is also considered as the best example for incomplete dominance shown by some of the plants. So, because of such types of Antirrhinum or Mirabilis jalapa or eggplant, we consider law of dominant is not being exhibited universally by all types of organisms, but there are some exceptions like these plants which are showing incomplete dominance. So, we will continue in the next video with the introduction to the law of segregation given by Mendel. We have to remember one more point, that Mendel has proposed these 3 laws to explain his experiment, but he did not do the experiment majorly to explain his laws. His laws have been extracted to explain his experiment. What is that experiment? Artificial hybridization. Okay.